What's up guys, back with another exercise video for you today, and it is everyone's favorite glute training. So yeah, I'm going to be running through my 4 favorite glute exercises for you today, breaking them down and helping you do them as effectively as possible. So yeah, let's dive into this. Okay, so the first exercise we got up isn't going to be a hip thrust. It's actually going to be some deficit reverse lunges. Now, the reason that I enjoy this exercise so much is because it trains your glutes in a lengthened range of movement, which is going to be very beneficial for helping them grow. So whenever it comes to training in the muscle, what we want to do is get some lengthened work in there, so where we're placing that stretch on the muscle, and this is going to be great for helping build that muscle for even further. So when it comes to the setup for this exercise, if you do have a Smith machine, I would recommend using it because the added stability of the machine is going to make it even better for you to be able to train to a higher intensity. When we come to something like a squat rack and stuff, we have a little bit less stability, so it's harder to exert yourself as much as you might be able to. But nonetheless, either one is great. So for this exercise, what we need is a bumper plate. The safety bar squat is optional. You can either use a safety bar or you can use a standard barbell, doesn't really matter. So what we want to do is, for getting into position, we're going to be stepping up to the top of the plate here. Now the reason we've got that plate is, again, it's going to give us more of a stretch through the glutes. So as I take a step back and come down towards the bottom, I can get a better stretch through my glute than if I was just on the floor. So what we're going to do is stay on the same leg throughout the movement. We're going to come down nice and controlled and then drive up to that top position. And again, we want to stay on the same leg throughout the entire movement. Now, what I want you doing is starting on your weaker leg first. If you start on your stronger leg first, chances are you're probably going to end up doing more repetitions. So we want to always match that weaker side. So to make sure we're getting the maximal work out of the glutes through this, what I want you to focus on doing is, 1, obviously getting that full range of movement all the way down to the floor. But secondly, slightly lean forward during the exercise. The more we stay upright in this position, the more tension we're going to place on the quads. As you see, as soon as I lean forward, I'm now placing a greater stretch through that glute. So I'm going to be using them more throughout the entire movement as I come up and down. Okay, next up, now we have everyone's favorite, the hip thrust. So when it comes to the hip thrust, it's a great exercise for targeting your glutes in the shortened range of movement. So when we just done those reverse lunges, like I said, we train them in the lengthened range, whereas now we're going to change the glutes in the shortened range, and yeah, we're going to be able to get a decent amount of weight behind it as well. So my recommendation when it comes to barbell hip thrust is make sure that you use an actual barbell and the weights. I see a lot of people like trying to use the short bars that are already made up with weights on there, but you can never go heavy enough, because the ideal thing about this is you can roll the weights over your thighs rather than trying to lift a heavy amount of weight onto it. So always opt for this setup instead. Now, one of the most common problems I see women facing when it comes to hip thrusting is the benches tend to be too high, right? When it comes to get into position, it's almost like you're going to hip thrust from your neck. So to help fix that, what I want you to think about doing is, what we want to do is sit back as far as we can first. What we're looking for is to get the corner of the bench sitting just underneath your shoulder blades where your bra strap would sit. From here, what you want to do is, if you place your elbows onto the bench and then just prop yourself up the tiniest bit, from here you'll be able to get into that position. So what that kind of looks like from here is, once we get the barbell over the legs into position, elbows are going to come up, you're going to bring your feet in to where you want them to be, and then you're just going to use a little bit of a pop up to that top position, and then from here you're going to be able to get into that right height for when it comes to the hip thrust. Now, when it comes to the actual technique of hip thrust, what I see a lot of people doing wrong is they lean back during the exercise. What this ends up doing is actually lifting slightly through the lower back, because you're hyperextending through the spine. Now, what I want you to do to make sure that we keep it more into the glutes is, I want you looking forward at like a 45-degree angle facing downwards, okay? So what I mean by that is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to brace my hands against the bar from here. I'm going to keep my head and chin slightly tucked in this position, and then I'm going to squeeze my glutes, drive up to that top point, keep my head forward, and then I'm going to move forward down as I come back down to that bottom position, okay? Now from here, I can get that fully shortened position through the glutes. Again, if I lean back during this way, what I'm doing is I'm just extending through the spine as opposed to just fully shortening those glutes. So that's what I want you really focusing on during each repetition. Now, when it comes to the foot position,
what we want to make sure is that we're not too wide or not too narrow, okay? We're going to go roughly about shoulder width apart. Then what we want to make sure is your feet aren't too far or too close. The further away your feet are during this exercise, the more you're going to feel it in the hamstrings. If you feel it too much in your quads, it's because your feet are too close to your bum. So what you want to do is find that sweet spot between those 2 points. This is going to allow you to get that maximal glute activation during the exercise. And then from here, what you're going to be able to do is just keep it all in the glutes and get a good solid squeeze at that top position during the exercise.
Okay, so next up, we're going to do a variation of a Romanian deadlift. Now, Romanian deadlifts are a great exercise for targeting your glutes and working them. However, they are going to be more hamstring orientated than glutes. This exercise, however, is going to be different. You're going to feel it light up your ass more than anything you felt whenever doing Romanian deadlifts before. Now, my clients love this variation for that very reason. And the reason that this is going to hit your glutes more is because what we're going to be doing is like a single leg version of a Romanian deadlift. Now, part of the role of the glutes is to help to stabilize the hips, okay? So the glutes are going to have to contract a little bit harder to help keep you and your hips in line and stabilized. So yeah, we'll jump into this exercise and we'll run through it. So what we're going to need is a landmine set up first. So we're going to need one end of the pole into a landmine, and then we're going to need this other end nice and free for us. What we're going to do is step over the bar, and I want you having your fist in line with the thigh that's going to be driving backwards, okay? So from here, you're going to brace your core, and I want you to think about pushing your foot back as far as you can into this exercise, okay? Don't think about leaning forward, otherwise we're going to go through the lower back as opposed to actually hinging through the hips. What we need to do here is really focus on pushing your foot back as far as you can, driving those hips back, then we'll get that stretch in the glute. It's still going to work the hamstrings, and then we're going to squeeze our glutes to come to the top, okay? Now, if you are someone that does struggle with stability during this exercise, what you can start out with first is doing a B stance version. So what you would do is just bring your back foot up onto your tiptoes a little bit, keeping 80% of the weight in that front leg, 20% in the back for a bit of stability. Then from here, you can focus on getting that stretch through the glute and hamstring and then driving up to the top. Once you've built up the strength and the stability after a while of practicing this, then you can switch to the version where you're doing more of that single leg driving back and forth. And then the final exercise I'm going to run through is an isolation exercise for the glutes. So we're going to go through some glute kickbacks. Now, there are many other variations of exercises that are good for the glutes, such as the leg press, normal squats, split squats. They're going to target the glutes very well. However, I wanted to go through this isolation exercise because, let's face it, if you wanted to tone and build your triceps, what would you do? You'd end up doing some isolation work for the triceps. You wouldn't just solely focus on shoulder presses, bench presses, chest presses, etc., right? You chuck in some isolation work. So that's exactly what we're going to do now here for the glutes as well. So when it comes to setting up the cable machine, what we want to make sure is this is all the way at the bottom of the machine, okay? Next, what you're going to want to do is grab one of these cuffs and set them up across your ankle, just like so. Making sure it's nice and tight, and the metal bit there is right at the front. So again, as always, whenever it comes to any single leg exercise, make sure you start with your weaker leg first, just so you don't end up overdoing it on your stronger leg and doing less on the weaker side. Then from here, what I want you doing is slightly leaning forward and hinging from the hips. The reason being, if I try and do this exercise stood up, as you can see, my range of motion is really limited. Whereas when I come down into this position, one, I place the glutes at more of a stretch at the front of the movement, but also I can get a greater range of movement while working the glutes, just like so. Now, what I see a lot of people doing wrong during this exercise is using too much momentum and throwing the leg back and forth, or using their hips to kind of sway in and out. What I need you to do is come down into this hinged position, lock yourself there, and then just think about squeezing your butt cheek as hard as you can. When you think about contracting your glutes, you end up stopping at the right height. I can't go any further than this. If I try and go any higher, as you can see, my back is arching, so that's what's doing the work. Whereas when I think about really squeezing my glutes and contracting it, that's as high as I can get, and my glute is now fully shortened and fully working. So what I want you to focus on is slowly releasing the glute and getting that stretch through the front. And then again, from here, contract
Get a good squeeze, nice and controlled. Slowly resist the weight on the way down, and then again, squeeze up to that top position.
So there you have it. There are my 4 favorite glute exercises that you can start utilizing and adding to your workouts. Again, you don't have to do these all in one session. You can spread them out across the week. If you enjoyed these exercises and you want to see more videos like this, then make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell notification.